Hello, history scholars. Mrs. Olson here. Today's lesson is on Indian Warli art. So we've been studying ancient India, and this is one of our last lessons within ancient India. So let's begin with the learning target, which says that you will be able to understand an ancient Indian art form as a perspective in ancient history. So what that means is that by studying Indian Warli art, we're going to gain perspective. We're going to be able to look at the people of ancient India and understand what it was like for that era by looking at their pictures, by looking at their forms of art. So here we go with the next slide. Now, this one is titled When and Where. So when was the Indian Warli art created and where did it begin? So it is named after the Warli tribes, and most of these tribes lived in the western Ghat region of India. And historians can date all the way back to 2500 BC. Okay, now where they originally found this art was on the walls of huts. So in ancient India, they are building their homes out of mud, and there's another substance that we're going to see that the walls were made out of. They would have thatched or grass roofs. So what we would find for the Indian Warli art was that it was created on the walls of their huts, on their homes. Now, historians do believe that this is most likely the oldest art form in India. All right, now this is kind of important. You might think, oh, what's the big deal with color? Well, the original Warli art was only created on two different backgrounds of color, okay? And that's because the walls of their huts were made of red mud or cow dung. So if you're not familiar with the word dung, this would be cow poop. Okay, and they are creating the walls because once it hardens, it becomes a solid form, and then it's useful as a wall for ancient India. Okay, so the background of Warli art is either red from the red mud or dark brown or black because of the cow dung that was used to make their walls. And the last note on this page is that you'll always want to know that with Warli art, the paint that they use, that they create their figures on the wall, is always white, okay? Now the idea behind the white paint is that it could be washed off and repainted every season. So you wouldn't have to just have one painting on your wall for the entire time that you lived there. You could redo it every season. All right, so what did they paint? Well, what kind of pictures is the question. And that is daily life. So things that they did every single day on a normal basis. So things like fishing, farming, because it's important to eat. They would do fun things like showing dancing, okay? And I've got some pictures to show you here pretty soon. So really, when you're looking at Warli art, there are three main shapes that they use, and those are circles, triangles, and squares. Okay? Now, when they create the human shape, so when they're trying to show a human being doing something, they use two triangles, and those triangles are joined at the tips. So think about the smallest end of a triangle. Those two tips are put together to form the human shape. Okay? So here we go with one picture of Warli art. Notice the background, and it is kind of that red mud clay type of color. And I want you to look for circles, squares, maybe not so many squares in this one, definitely triangles. So here's the human being, right? So the 2 points of the triangle are put together. The top half represents the top triangle represents the top half of the human body, and then the bottom triangle represents like our hips and our booty, our legs here. Okay, now this one actually had a name to it, and it was harvesting dates. So if you notice, there are date trees. These are palms, right? Dates are small little pieces of fruit that we can eat, and they actually save really well because you dry a date and you can keep it for many, many months. And so that was good when they didn't have refrigeration. So you can tell that by looking at all of these that it is date harvesting time. Okay, and here is another one to show you. I want you to notice the circles, the triangles, and the squares, right? Look at this line of people, circles, triangles, and we can see square forms with their houses. And even this, I'm going to say this is like a dancing line because here we have an instrument that somebody is playing and they're all joined together in this long line. It kind of reminds me of a chorus line. Okay? So that brings us to the end of Indian Warli art. I hope you had fun looking at these and learning a little bit about ancient India.